And we're back to talk about more comic books we've read. I'm with Taylor from Taylor Talks Comics, and we're going to discuss some lot of cool books here. So let's do that.
Read comics with this guy. I can see with my eyes. Take a look in a comic book, a reading rainbow.
So first I have Scurry from Max Smith. So this was a web comic that Max Smith did. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure it's on camera. Did for quite a bit. And I think he ran some Kickstarters back in the day. I kept seeing people had like these giant sized versions of this, like 3 volumes. This just recently though has been printed by Image and has the entire story in this one little book. And it's by Skybound, so like Robert Kirkman's imprint. This was my first time reading this. This book has been hyped up for me for the last few years, and I've been wanting to. And it was for my library. It's very reading rainbow-like, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I picked it up for my library to try it out, and
And you kept it?
well, I'm going to return it.
Oh,
Don't worry.
okay.
Don't worry, public library. You'll get it back. But I want to try it out, and it was very good. Like, it really blew me away. The artwork is this like painted. I think it's digitally painted, but painted like animation style. Like, it looks like a very nice animated movie. I don't know if you can see that. But the story it's post-apocalyptic, but not like Mad Max style. Just the humans have disappeared from the earth, kind of thing. So all the animals are now fending for themselves, and especially the mice here are the main characters, or the main protagonists, I guess. And they're struggling to survive because before they would just eat scraps from the humans, and now there are no humans to leave scraps for. So now they're like going from like all these abandoned houses, trying to find food for their colony and whatnot. But then you encounter all kinds of other animals, like the cats, like you can see on the cover here. They're vicious. They're very mean and vicious and trying to kill the mice all the time. And then there's wolves involved, moose, birds, of course. So it's like, and it felt to me, I don't always like to say like, oh, this should be a movie, because I like comics to stay comics. But this is like ripe for making this beautiful, like epic animated film. I think like even like the artwork style lends itself to that. And it is with Skybound, and Robert Kirkman likes to adapt pretty much anything. So I'd be shocked if he didn't have the idea of picking this up to make it an animated movie. But regardless, it's beautiful. The story is great. Like, you really like feel for the characters and feel for the plight and stuff. And there's even infighting within the mouse colony about what they do and how they should go look for the resources. Should they go into the city, go to the forest? So there's a lot of infighting like that. But it says on the cover too, it says, a modern day classic with an underdog readers will believe in. And that's a great blurb, because the mice, these 2 main mice here, Wix and Pict, you really feel for their characters and really are in for their journey. And there's even at one point they get separated from each other, and you think like, there's no way, the way they get separated, like there's no way they're gonna be able to find each other. I really hope they do. And so you're like in for the journey of that. And then even the climax of it felt to me like the climax of a Disney film. Like all those animated Disney films back in the day always had like this kind of formulaic, but it was like the epic climax where everything's going to heck and everyone's fighting, and you're rooting for the heroes to overcome and survive. And I won't spoil what happens, but it's very, very good. It's split into like 10 chapters in here, because like I said, these were originally released in like 3 graphic novels, but they are separated each chapter by like a little cover, if you will. And then I don't know if he plans on making more. It does lend itself to be able to add to the story if you'd like to revisit it. But Max Smith, like I said, he's a great artist. He does all the writing and art in this. And I guess he also does a lot of concept art for like Games Workshop and Warhammer. So he has a background in that as well. But to my knowledge, this is the only comic he's done. But it was a great first outing, and I hope to see more from him.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's Scurry.
Very good. My first book for this month is Fourth World, Volume 1 from Jack Kirby. So I've been talking about reading Fourth World for like a year now. And I finally got the 2 absolutes that collect.
Such a beautiful book.
Yes, super awesome. And they come in cool slipcases, but obviously don't have a slipcase here. So I've read the first volume. One of the things that was super attractive to me about reading Fourth World and why I've had it on my list to read for so long was just the idea of Kirby and the big epic world that he was creating, separate from all the other universes, and his idea for the story, and really like his idea for writing this thing. And he didn't have the vocabulary didn't exist at the time, but to create like these epic volumes of these books that weren't happening at the time and weren't really achieved to his vision, but the vision and the whole idea of the thing was very attractive to me. So I've read the first volume now. I still have the second volume to read. But getting into this, I was warned, I think you warned me about the
Jimmy
Olsen issues. Yeah. So it starts off with like 3 or 4 of those. And I got through those and I was like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Yeah. But then later into the story, and you have more Jimmy Olsen stuff, and it really does like interrupt. I almost wish that they just weren't collected.
That's what I always say too. It's just because like at the beginning they tie in a lot, but then as it gets further, it's like they're almost like less and less have to do with the Fourth World.
Yeah, and one of the things I was really surprised with reading it, I expected there to be a lot more like connected tissue between the stories.
Yeah.
I mean, the universe obviously connects, and there's different things where you're like, oh, this applies here, but I thought it was going to be a lot more like crossover thing, and it wasn't. But it was super awesome. I will say, like, the thing that stands out to me the most, and probably I'll always remember reading it. So I'm reading through the Jimmy Olsen's, I was like, oh yeah, it's a comic book, it's Kirby, it's good. But then I got to the first, well, maybe not the first. I forget the actual order. I think Miracle Man is first. But there was one issue that was either the first Forever People or the first New Gods. And I got through that issue. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, he just told like a year's worth of story in one issue. Like, it's unreal. Like, you created a whole universe. You created history for that universe and all these different characters. And then that was one comic book issue. Like, that's unbelievable. Like, it would have took Bendis 2 years
right
to tell that story.
And that's the thing too, is like every issue from then on too, like it's just like exploding with new ideas. Like every page you're like learning about whole new concepts.
And that's a great point too. Like, even so, at one point there was like backstories, where it was like 4-page stories that were in the back of certain titles, and in those, it's like every single one of those was a new character that's created. And just reading that, and then other stories and stuff I've heard of Kirby creating different things, I'm convinced that you could have sat down with Jack at any time and be like, give me a new comic character. And like off the top of his head, not only would he have the character name, the costume, the design, but the whole history and everything. Like, I just think it was just all there ready to pour out.
Yeah, I mean, he's just, they call him the king, and no one ever has even tried to claim anything else, or no one else has ever tried to claim that moniker, because not only the amount of pages that he put out, but just like the amount of like ideas and concepts he came up with. It's just unmatched. There'll never be another person that can come up with that many ideas as he did. And just like you talked about, like he was at the forefront of the idea of the graphic novel. And I know Eisner was doing some of that stuff before, but like he had the idea of these beautiful collected editions, like you see here. Like he wanted to be like held up there with like the Great American Novel, like in bookstores, and like that was his kind of concept. And that's just one of the ideas he had that was like this futuristic concept of comic books, of the medium.
Well, and one of the things that's almost tragic too is that he wasn't able to achieve that vision that he was describing.
Right.
Like his original plan for Fourth World and getting other people involved and creating this whole universe that has a beginning and an end, but you told this grand story, this huge universe, is amazing. I wish he was given the freedom to actually do that.
And that's another great point too, because like it's so sad too, because he had ideas. He was going to bring Ditko in. Like his idea was just to be the guy that writes it. Like he's going to launch all the titles, like he did with Marvel. And Marvel in the Silver Age, like Kirby does like the first few issues of all those characters, and then they put it on to someone else because he can't do 15 issues a month, no matter how fast he is. But so his idea was to launch all the titles, get them going, and then pass the artwork duties onto other people. And one of the things that has been said was that Ditko was going to do Mr. Miracle. I was like, that would have been so, like, as much as I love Kirby's Mr. Miracle, like I would love to see Ditko's version of that character.
And one of the things too that I forgot to mention when I was talking about like just his creative mind, how he had all these character ideas. Like I think Marvel at one point was just having him do covers, but the way that they were doing it with the Marvel way, with him doing covers at the time, they were really kind of using his creativity there. Like he would come up with the cover, and they're like, "Oh, well, that's a new character. Let's run with that. Thanks, Jack."
Like that was like the launching pad.
Yeah.
What issues are collected in this? I have a table. I know this is like riveting radio here. But I just want to see.
So, while he's looking at that, so those are all the amazing things, and you can't say enough good things about Kirby. I will say when I was reading through this, it wasn't like I didn't have trouble putting it down. Like it wasn't one of those things like, oh, I can't stop reading. I have to read. I have to read. I have to read. Like I needed my breaks. I needed to step aside and be like, okay, I'm going to read something lighter, something easier. And it's more, and it's not, I know he gets criticized a lot for his dialogue and stuff. I didn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I don't understand that criticism.
I think it was just like most like Silver Age books, like there's more involved in it. And I just need that time to step away and breathe and then get back to it. So I'm definitely excited to read the next volume, but this wasn't like, I couldn't put it down. Like I could definitely put it down and step away. But
I have a feeling it's going to change though. So now that I see what's collected in this, the best issues are in volume 2.
All right.
Like there's a particular New Gods issue and a particular Mr. Miracle issue that are like, and not just me, people hold these as like the best Kirby issues ever of comics. So, and that's in volume 2. So I have a feeling that you're going to, and just like the escalation too of characters. I think I might have told you this too. Like the Orion, did you say the backstory? Orion's like the true son of Darkseid, but he's sent off to the what's Apocalypse, and then what's the other one? The good
New
place.
Genesis.
New Genesis. Thank you. So the idea is for the Fourth World that there's a pact made, and Orion and Mr. Miracle are the two sons of the All-Father and Darkseid. They swap sons, and then they're raised differently. So Orion is like kept from Darkseid, and it just constantly builds and builds and builds. It's like a pro wrestling storyline where it's just like you're just constantly anticipating that, like, oh, they're gonna finally fight. Oh no. They're gonna finally like, oh no.
And that's something I had heard about that before I started reading, and I'm glad I did. Like that's not like a spoiler necessarily, but reading it, I can see like all the breadcrumbs now.
Yeah,
because I know where it's going. Like, and it makes me want to like after I read it, like I need to go back and read it a second time because if he's leaving those breadcrumbs from that story, maybe there's other stuff too that I'm missing. In the first read. And
just like you said, like, or what we're talking about, like every page is new concepts. Like there's no way you can soak in 100% of what he's giving you on just one read. So that's another thing I love about it too, is like you can revisit these and like pick up new things every time, or just, and you can also read them in different contexts. Like I know DC recently released paperback versions that have like just the New God stories in one paperback, just the Mr. Miracle, just Jimmy Olsen. So they're all separated that way. And I kind of want to like pick them up, but I have this in 2 different formats already, so I don't need to do that. But I kind of want to read it in that context too. Like, I just want to read just the New Gods issues and see like how things played out there, if I'm missing anything from the things that do get tied in.
No, I think there's definitely some appeal to that too. Like reading through this, I was, because you get like one issue of that title, and then you don't get it for another 3 or 4 issues. Where there's definitely points with Forever People and New Gods where I'm like, I just want more of that.
Yeah,
like. But it's going to be a little bit. I'm going to read through these other people, and sometimes like Mr. Miracle, like I'm like, all right, let's just get through this because New Gods is coming up.
Right, for sure. And I will say too, though, so each issue or each series was canceled after 11 issues. So New Gods and Forever People end at issue 11, and it was canceled prematurely, unfortunately. But Mr. Miracle goes on to issue 18, and I will say that issues 12 through 18 of Mr. Miracle really just kind of become, I don't want to say generic superhero fare, but it's not the New God stuff. Like it's not the Fourth World kind of stuff. It's kind of like I'm telling a superhero story now. Yeah. So there's still great issues. Like there's still like a lot of fun, but it did leave me feeling like, oh, I kind of want more of that Fourth World stuff.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if I had to surmise everything that I've read or my thoughts on it. I guess I would say there's a ton of good things to say about it, but there are those flaws, and most of the flaws were just that Jack wasn't allowed to do what he wanted.
Yeah,
so. That's unfortunate, but what we did get is still great. But it could have been so much greater.
And I will end on so this story got ended prematurely, and it broke Jack's heart. There's even like 2 years later, they went to him and like, hey, do you want to do more Fourth World stuff? And he's like, no, like I'm not gonna relive that heartbreak. So I think Jerry Conway and some other people do it, which that story is okay. But then when he goes back to Marvel after this, he does the Eternals, which is people kind of say like it's like a successor to this. There's not really some people are like they tie together, they don't. But what's great about the Eternals is it only lasted 19 issues, and you could tell that Jack was like, they're going to cancel this at any moment, so I'm going to be pumping ideas out every issue. So like, you think like every page has a new concepts in this one, like Eternals is just like mind blowing because it's just like, I don't know what issue they're going to cancel this on, so I'm just going to I want to make sure I get this in there, get this in there, get this in there. So it's kind of interesting to read this and then read Eternals, and you're like, whoa, like this is like even faster paced. But
yeah, so that's my month of Fourth World so far, and then next month I'll probably have the second volume of that and finish it up.
I can't wait till you read that one. It's gonna be good stuff. Well, I don't know how to follow that up with, but I do have a book that you lent me.
All right. Yes.
So this is Howling Commandos of S.H.I.E.L.D. And the concept of this, I hadn't even heard of this. You messaged me one day, you're like, hey, have you read this before? And I was like, I've never even heard of it. This was during the all new, all different Marvel, or whatever the era was.
One of the all news.
Yeah, and the teens, the 2000 teens, where they're doing all that stuff. I think Secret Wars from Hickman was happening at this time. But this was only lasted 7 issues. There's like the S.H.I.E.L.D. number 9 issue that Al Ewing wrote, and then there's the Howling Commandos of S.H.I.E.L.D. 1 through 6. And I think what got us on this was that we were talking about the original Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos run, and then you found this, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just randomly came across it too. Like, I'd never heard of this, but I was just like going through the giant wall of trade paperbacks, and I saw it, and I was like, holy cow, wait a second here.
Yeah, so it's monsters fighting monsters with like these soldiers and super agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. mixed in. So Dum Dum Dugan, who is one of mine and my son's favorite characters, just because his name's Dum Dum Dugan, and he looks great, like mustache and the derby hat. He becomes the leader of this sector of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think it's called Stake, Stake, and but he's not just the normal Dum Dum Dugan. I don't want to spoil it, but he's not just the normal human version of Dum Dum Dugan, and he's in charge of getting all this ragtag team of monsters to go fight other monsters. And I love comics that have ragtag teams just thrown together, like Guardians of the Galaxy, Defenders. Like, I love any of these teams that are like thrown together. They're all these different personalities interacting with each other. I almost care more about the interactions of the characters than I do about them fighting anybody, because it just, I don't know, the drama and the arguments and stuff. But in here, you also get a lot of great spy action too, with different scientists that are maybe not on the up and up, and maybe or maybe they're not in favor of certain things. Even like the fact that Dum Dum Dugan, right away, he's skeptical of this whole process and all the things that they're doing with S.H.I.E.L.D. And so you get some of that maybe modern social commentary about like, it's like Jurassic Park when they say you didn't think about, or just because you could, you didn't think about if you should. I probably butchered that, but you understand. A lot of that kind of commentary in there, which makes it a lot of fun. But for the most part, it's just like a pulpy monster book with all these different characters, even like Orgo, which is like a Jack Kirby monster from the monsters, like Jack Kirby area monsters. Man-Thing, who I love from the Steve Gerber era. And then, like I said, the Howling Commandos from Jack Kirby. It was perfect for like just a fun comic, and I wish it went on further. I would have read like a whole 30-issue omnibus of this.
Yeah, for sure. I picked it up and I was reading it, and I knew in advance that was the whole thing. And just reading it, I was sad the whole time. I was like, oh, there's not enough.
Yeah.
Like, I'm enjoying this, but I just want so much more.
I will say, eventually, they start mixing in with like the Sphinx character and like some Egyptian kind of monsters. I was expecting at any time for Moon Knight to show up, because he's all stuck into the Egyptian lore, even just for a pop-in or a crossover episode or issue or something like that. But he doesn't. So it's like the whole time I was like, oh, Moon Knight's going to show up any minute now. Any minute. And he didn't. But this could have gone on longer. I will say, as far as the writing goes, I kind of wish Al Ewing wrote the whole thing, because the first issue, it kicks off with S.H.I.E.L.D. number 9, and Al Ewing writes it. And I love Al Ewing's writing. Like, his Immortal Hulk run was great. I want to read his Guardians of the Galaxy run, but I haven't read that yet. But his writing especially lends itself, like Immortal Hulk is like a monster horror comic, and the way he does it, and it lends itself to this kind of material. So I kind of wish that he wrote, and I feel like if they revisited this team and had Al Young write it, now that he's got a bigger name, it probably would get a bigger run. And I also will say, in conclusion, Hitmonkey was awesome. I've not read anything with Hitmonkey before. I've seen him. I think there's even a cartoon show on
I believe
Hulu.
So. Sounds familiar.
That came out recently. I'm going to go back and watch that now. I've always heard the concept of him and seen like drawings and stuff of him, but I never read anything with him in it. This is my first thing, and now I want to go find more Hitmonkey.
Yeah, so I have found there's another trade that I have on my list to get. I don't know if it's the same group of people, but it's Miss Deadpool in the Howling Command. Is it in there?
Yeah, it's right there.
Oh, right there. Yeah, so I guess I missed that advertisement. But so I ran into a single issue of that at a comic store, so I looked up and there's a trade of that I have on my list to get. I hope it's at least somewhat similar to what we have in this one, because this was awesome. I really liked it a lot.
Looks like Jerry Duggan writes that. So I would be curious too, since I saw that too when I was reading this. Well, not too. You didn't see it, but
my next book is a big one, big in, I guess, trim size, not as fat as that, but it's Fantastic Four Grand Design by Tom Scioli. So I got all the Grand Design books now. I haven't read them all yet, but I've read Hulk and then this one. And it kind of, so my feelings on this book, first, the cover is, I love this as a gimmick type cover.
The best use of spot gloss ever.
Yeah, so I don't know if it shows up there.
I think I saw her show up, make an appearance.
But the Fantastic Four are all glossy, and we're missing Invisible Woman, but she's a gloss figure here, so if the light hits it just right, you get her silhouette too. I don't know, if we're calling that a gimmick cover, it's my favorite of all time. I love that. But more than anything in the book, like my feelings on Scioli, I think, are complicated. And art's subjective, and it speaks to people differently. But why it's so complicated is last year I read Kirby, A King of Comics, and it was probably my favorite read of the year. I absolutely adore that book. And then this is the second other piece that Scioli's done since then, and none of them have been even close to that for me personally.
You also read G.I. Joe and Transformers.
Yes, yeah, and that one didn't really click too well with me. And so I like Tom's artwork a lot. I think it's his storytelling that kind of puts me off a little bit. But in this one, I think, in my opinion, if you had read all the Fantastic Four books, you probably got a lot more out of this. It wasn't as good of a story on its own. So I have I've read arcs of Fantastic Four, but I've never really dove too deep into it. So there were points where I feel like I was getting like a Wikipedia page summary of things, like very quick bullet points. Oh, this happens, this happens, this happens. And it wasn't really that entertaining on its own because I don't have that back knowledge, I guess. But then, so each of the Grand Design books are 2-issue comics that have been put together in these awesome treasure editions, which, if you don't know, are huge.
This is standard size.
So, bam, they're massive and awesome, and I love them. And they're doing the Black, White, and Blood books in the same size as well. But so the first issue, like I was saying, is very, in my opinion, was like very bullet pointed. All these things happened to Fantastic Four. But then the second issue, I think you said, got a little crazy.
Yeah, Scioli says the first issue was for Marvel, the second issue was for me.
I like the second issue a lot more.
Yeah.
So the second issue, I felt like I was reading more of a linear story, like he's telling a story in this one. And I did enjoy it a lot more. It still wasn't like, didn't knock my socks off by any means, but I did enjoy it a lot more. And then it reprints This Man, This Monster, which is fabulous.
With Ed Piskor coloring.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so he's coloring it like the Grand Design style of the aged look on it.
Yeah. But overall, it was a fun read, but not my favorite.
Yeah, so this one is only 2 issues. So before, let's start off with, I don't know why I'm pointing back there. I don't know if you can see it. Ed Piskor started off the Grand Design project with X-Men, and it was released in 3 treasury editions with 2 issues each. But then since then, Fantastic Four is only 2 and Hulk's only 2. But yeah, so Tom Scioli said the first issue was for Marvel, the second issue was for me. And I think it's kind of like his way of saying, like, showing Marvel, like, this is what I'm going to do. And they're like, oh, okay. And then he's like, now I'm going to get crazy. And they have to take it. They have to accept it no matter what. And I agree the second issue is a lot better because he takes some liberties with things. Like things truly happened like that in Marvel, but it's almost like Tom's sitting in front of a group of kids and he's just kind of embellishing the story a little bit, or like the coolest moment in this whole book, which I'm just going to spoil because I think I always spoil this one moment just because the concept of it gets people to understand the idea of how bonkers it gets. But the Black Panther Voltron scene is my favorite thing in this book. So all of the cat-related characters of Marvel form a Voltron in one of the scenes. That's how like high concept it gets. So that didn't actually happen in Marvel, but did those people team up once or twice? Maybe, yeah. So it's kind of like he's like telling his kids, and they're all like wide-eyed, like, "Oh yeah, all the characters that are cat-related teamed up," and then they formed a robot, Voltron, and they're like, "Whoa!" Like that's the way it felt to me, the way he was telling the story, and that's kind of how Tom Scioli's writing feels to me. It's like it's just a kid with a bunch of action figures, just like bashing them together and making up these wild kind of stories and concepts. And that's what I kind of love about it. Like, does it always make sense? Is it kind of nonsensical at times? Sure. Like the closing issues of the G.I. Joe versus Transformers, they're really getting kind of out there concepts. But I love it. Like it's just someone that's just like you can tell they're passionate about it and their imagination's just pouring onto the page, and that's the endearing part about it to me. But I love these two issues from Tom Scioli, and I think it's mostly the artwork. I love Tom's Kirby-esque artwork, and I think he's kind of even getting out of just because it used to be like his early stuff, like read like Godland, which just looks like a Kirby cover band, like it's just like pure Kirby, and now he's kind of developing his own kind of thing, like this back here doesn't like this kind of cartoony right here, like that's not a Kirby way that he'd ever draw Mr. Fantastic. And then you mentioned the Jack Kirby King of Comics biography. The Stan Lee one's coming out on Free Comic Book Day. They're doing a preview issue, and then that biography will be coming out later. That one seems like he's even developed his style a step further. So he's one of my favorite creators. I'll buy anything that Tom Scioli does just because I love his imagination and the bonkers ideas he comes up with. I'm there for the ride.
And that's another like part of my conflicting like complicated relationship I have with Scioli. Like I've already pre-ordered I Am Stan because I want that so much. So it's not like he turns me off and I'm completely giving up on him. I really like his art. It's just some of the storytelling sometimes loses me. But I love the grain design concept, the concept of the grain design books, and the cartoonist kayfabe guys. When they were doing the Hulk episode, there was just like one throwaway mention, like, what do we do next? Or what does somebody else do next?
Yeah.
And they like briefly mentioned Daredevil, and I almost fell out of my chair. Like I would be so there for anyone doing a Daredevil grain design book. I think would be.
Do you have any artists in mind for that?
No. But
because that's the thing too. It's the grand design project, and the thing that like makes it the whole idea of it is to have one cartoonist do all the writing, penciling, lettering, inking, or in Scioli's case, he doesn't ink, but they do all of the artwork, even down to the lettering. And they tell a story about one character or team in linear fashion, however they want, kind of thing. So it has to be somebody that can handle doing all the art duties. If Marvel tries to do, because right now they got the three kayfabe guys, Scioli, Rugg, and Piskor. They're all best friends. So if they have someone else do it outside of that group, I hope they consult that team. They don't have to because they own the grand design name. But I hope they do, and I hope that it's not someone that's like, I'm not doing my lettering. I hope it's somebody that still keeps true to that.
And because it is like a solo project, like it has to be a character that you're super passionate about too. And that's so far the three that we've had definitely meet that criteria. So finding someone that would have that amazing, like it seems like Spider-Man would be an obvious grain design, but you have to find the right person for that project.
And the person that's been proposed by Piskor, Rugg, and Scioli, I don't know if Scioli said it, but Piskor and Rugg have definitely done it. It's Michel Fife, who does the Copra comic book. He's already even done like an art. He's put it on Twitter and Instagram. It's like an image of all the different eras of Spider-Man, in his style. And he kind of has a little bit of a Scioli style in that he doesn't use a lot of inks. He does like a lot of like, it looks like colored pencil on the coloring a little bit, and the pencils are really like the line work. But he said that he would like to do a Spider-Man one, and Piskor and Rugg are like, yes, we'd love to see you do that. So I'm hoping that's the route they go. And again, Fife, he does all of his that's how he does his own comics in Cobra, which is a great series. But he does all the pencils and lettering and all the stuff on those comics. So he would definitely be up for that. And he loves Spider-Man. He also actually had a correspondence relationship with Ditko back in the day. So before Ditko passed, Fife and him, because Ditko was really passionate about other creators. So if a creator like sent him a letter and stuff, like Ditko would write back and stuff. So they had like a correspondence together. I don't know if they ever met in person, but it was a very long relationship. Fife has always talked about it. So that's kind of a cool tie in there too, is that he has that built-in friendship with Ditko in there. But so I'm hoping that's the next one that's announced. But I just hope it's not watered down to where somebody does it and it's like a whole team of creative teams. I don't know.
Yeah, it would be nice if they contacted the Cartoonist Kayfabe guys and be like, hey, do you want to help in some way orchestrate behind the scenes, like get somebody started? Or
because it's a cool idea. I always love any sort of Marvel project or DC where they go outside of their comfort zone and pick up somebody from like the undergrounds or independents to do a project like that. Like those are my favorite issues. Like I don't collect a lot of single issues from Marvel DC now because I just do collected editions. But if I find one issue, or if they're saying like Daniel Warren Johnson's going to do this one issue of Superman or something like that, like I'll pick that up. Like, so it's like kind of you're grabbing those independent underground fans of these guys and kind of bring them in there. But yeah. I love it. So we talked about the all new, all different era. This takes place in there too. One thing, you're right though, the sales and stuff, like there's a bunch of renumbering happening in there because the sales weren't so great. But the more I visit this era, there's a lot of fun things happening back then. I feel like, I don't know if it's because it works better in collected editions and that's why sales weren't so great, but like Squirrel Girl happened during that time, which I haven't read that, but Ms. Marvel happened during that time and I love that run. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur happened during that time, and I love that run as well. So there's some runs that are like just a lot of fun comics that seem like they're reaching new audiences with them, and this is one of those. So this is Howard the Duck Omnibus by Chip Zdarsky and Joe Quiones, and Joe Quiones did the artwork for the Batman '89 series that I think I talked about last month. So it's interesting to see him do a more comedic book. And Chip Zdarsky, if you've not read anything from him, he's known as a comedic writer, but I think he's getting to the point where he's like, all great comedians can play like dramatic roles as well, because like if you can do comedy well, you can do drama well, you can pull those emotions out of people. And I think that kind of is a perfect example of Chip Zdarsky, because he's writing like the Daredevil run right now that people are just like blown away by, and that's not funny. That's not a funny book. Who does Daredevil funny? But before that, he was known as a comedic writer or an artist. He did his own artwork on Sex Criminals, which was a series I did with Matt Fraction. And then on Twitter, I guess he's like known as a funny guy. So this is the first series he ever did with Marvel, and when the editor reached out to him, he's like, "Oh, you want me to do a funny book?" I'm sure. Like, and so he always talks about that too. He did an interview with New Condition recently where he's like, I don't want to be typecast as a funny guy. Like, I love that people think I'm funny, but I don't want to be just that. So this is Howard the Duck. I'm a huge fan of Steve Gerber. I think I just mentioned him earlier. And he co-created Howard the Duck character, and it was like the most important character that he ever created that he had a real fondness for. He even fought Marvel in court over the rights to the character, which seemed absurd because, you know, of all the characters people create, in Marvel, no one else ever fought that, I guess, but he did because he wanted to carry on the character. There's even a fun little crossover issue where he stole the character back. We can go over that some other time, but so Steve Gerber really had the voice for Howard the Duck, and I love that run, and I love Steve Gerber, and so I'm always nervous about reading anything else from Howard the Duck or someone else writing to Howard the Duck. I'm like, I don't know, are they going to understand really what Steve Gerber got out of the character, or are they just going to be like, oh, it's a funny duck character? And I have to say that I was skeptical about this omnibus, but I bought it. It was a fairly cheap price. It's only $60 cover price, so it was like $20-$30 to give it a chance. And I'm glad I did, because Chip Zdarsky understood Steve Gerber's work. You could tell by reading this that Chip Zdarsky went through and read every issue of Steve Gerber's Howard the Duck character. And I want to say, I don't want to turn anybody off. You don't have to have read any of that to love this one. There are some little nods and stuff here or there. But you can just tell that the heart of the character is there. So this only collects, 18 issues. So it's a very slim omnibus. But Joe Quiones does most of the artwork throughout. I think Kevin McGuire does one of the issues, and then there's some backup strips that happen. There's also a crossover with Squirrel Girl, which I know your daughter loves Squirrel Girl. I'd be curious if she had read that crossover in any of the collections she has, because there's a Squirrel Girl issue in here, and then the crossover into Howard. But the whole thing is, yes, it's a funny book. Yes, you can see on the cover there a little bit. He becomes like a private eye detective, like his own office. There it is, where he's has a private detective agency, but it's like a failing one. He doesn't get a lot of customers. People aren't really. It's kind of like he's even in the same building as She-Hulk, running her attorney office. So he's constantly like fighting with her, like, how do you get so many people, so many clients? And that's the fun thing too, is like all the heroes that pop up in this. It's kind of amazing to me that Chip Zdarsky was like able to get Spider-Man in here on some issues, and all these other characters. And the great thing about it is, like, Spider-Man, when he appears, is like this very two-dimensional, like bumbling idiot almost, and he's always like, something will happen and he'll just go off and cry in the corner. Like, you'll see him like crying, and everyone's like, there's Peter Parker, his life's ruined again. So it's almost like these characters around Howard are all like two-dimensional versions, and you can imagine it like that's how Howard imagines this character. Like, that's how Howard sees Spider-Man. It's not written from like Spider-Man the way hundreds of other writers have written him. It's written in a way that, like, this is Howard's perception of that character. But there's a lot of heart in this too. Like, there's a lot of moments where Howard's just trying to get back home, because that's the whole thing about Howard the character too, is that he ends up on this planet with the hairless apes, he calls them. And he's like, I don't understand these hairless apes. Like, I want to go back to my planet where like ducks reign supreme. So there's parts where he's trying to get back home, and he can't. He runs into issues. There's a lot of crossover too, the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a fun lineup because the Thing was part of the Guardians during that era, as well as Kitty Pryde was Star-Lord back then, I guess. But a lot of interactions with Rocket Raccoon and stuff are hilarious, because you just imagine both these disgruntled anthropomorphic characters, like, I don't know, fighting and arguing and stuff. It's just a lot of fun. Like, this was a fun, like, a blast of a comic book. I couldn't put it down. I read it all in, like, I think across 2 days. Eventually I had to fall asleep, but read it across 2 days. And it was just like, it was a great way too for me, because I've read a lot of Bronze and Silver Age Marvel. That's usually my bag. Is like, I like to stick in those eras. Modern runs I don't really dabble in too much. I want to know what the kids are reading these days, so I'll dip my toes in them. And this had a lot of little pieces of this era that I'm like, oh, I kind of want to read the Guardians run where the Thing's a part of the team now. And I kind of want to read Unbelievable Gwenpool is in here in one issue. And she seemed like that character would seem like, oh, it's like a pink Deadpool character. I don't get it. But it was kind of fun reading her in that issue. So now I kind of want to try that series out too. So it was a good way to dip my toes into the all different Marvel, or whatever it's called. And makes me want to keep exploring more runs of that era. But definitely highly recommend this though.
All right. My next one is a little older. I got The Crow, the special edition of The Crow. So I think this book was like 2011 or so when it was released. So I've had this sitting on my shelf for a little while. I read the original trade paperback of the issues, but this is the special edition, or author's edition, however you want to look at it, where he added, I think, like 60 pages. It was quite a bit that he added to it, and really added more heart into the story, I think. So even drew even more on the emotions of that. So I'm a big fan of The Crow, the James Barr books and the movie, the first movie, the good movie.
That's one of your favorite comic book movies ever, right?
It is, yeah. But the book is, so the movie I think is a lot more focused on the revenge aspect, where the book, James Barr was taking a lot from like personal experiences and stuff that he had gone through.
Super tragic personal experiences.
Yeah, it's pretty rough stuff. So the book itself is a lot more emotional darkness and dealing with those kind of things. But so I read it all in one sitting recently, and just I forgot how much I enjoyed the comic book before, but then the new things that were put into it, a lot of it was like the backstory, the love story that was added to it. It was just awesome. Like, it should have been there from the beginning. And there's an introduction where he explains why it was added, why it wasn't there before, and a lot of it was just limitations on him. This was the first book that he ever did, and he didn't really understand the printing process even, where he talks about page counts. He thought you just had to have an even number and it'd be fine. And so some of the books were, he pulled pages out of the book to get it the correct page count afterwards, and in this format he was able to put everything back in. So I loved it. I thought it was a great read. If you're at all interested in the Crow character, I think this is very worthwhile to dive into and see. But it is definitely, I needed something happier to read after I was done with it.
Yeah, I've never read the comic. I watched the movie per your recommendation years after. I think you recommended it for me for like 10 years, and then I finally watched it. And the movie was good. I really enjoyed it, but I always wanted to read the comic. And I know James O'Barr's art style too is like this really intense, like just like he just fills the page with like pencil and line work. So I always love that in an artist. I always love when artists just like constant marks everywhere, just like filling the whole page with artwork. So his art style has always appealed to me. I just need to try it out. So the pages he added though, when did he add them? Was it years later, or was it
when this came out?
Oh, okay.
So it was many years later. I think it was like 20 years later.
Is there a jarring experience with like noticing the difference in art style? Okay,
a little bit, but it works because most of them are flashbacks.
Oh, okay.
So it fits very well, but it is very different from his other art style. 20 years later, he's obviously developed a lot more. But because most of it was flashbacks, it still works really well. And it looks softer too, which also plays into
itself,
that, because that's the happy part of his life. So it's like this softer, happier art style. It works.
Yeah, I do like when flashback. That's the only time I like when art changes mid-issue. Sometimes is like when it's a flashback, because then it kind of makes sense. But if it's kept that way, because that would be jarring to read like an artist's work from 20 years ago to now. Like, of course they're going to develop and stuff, but
yeah. But I had, a blast. I had read through it all in one sitting, and afterwards I needed some happy moments to get myself out of this mood. But it was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Nice. All right. So my last one, if you've noticed, you've been following our show. I have one Batman book every month and one manga. So this month I decided to mash them together with Bat manga. So this book is one of my, like, as far as like a book goes, a collection, it's one of my favorite books in my collection that I have because of just the overall design of it. So it comes with like this little belt. I don't know what it is. So you can see the artwork or the image there is like, it looks like Adam West era Batman with Burt Ward, but that's not Adam West and Burt Ward on the cover. And then on the back here, you can see what the manga looks like. So this is like a part coffee table book with like ephemera, part comics. And Chip Kidd, if you've ever read a book that he's like designed, like he's just one of my favorite book designers. Just everything he puts into it and the way he scans images. Normally he photographs the comics. Is how he does it. He has, I don't know if he worked on this one. Jeff Spear. Yeah, Jeff Spear is a photographer. And he like actually photographs the comic book and then puts it in here so it looks like you're actually reading it. But it starts off with like a lot of like, the backstory. So 60s Batman's happening, blowing up the world for pop culture. Like it's a huge phenomenon. So in Japan, they get a hold of Hiro Kawata. They get a hold of him and like, hey, would you like to do a Batman comic? And he's like, I don't know what that is. So they showed him some images of the show. Like he had like almost nothing to go off of. And he just made this manga. And it's like really kind of bonkers and crazy, which I love. Because it's kind of like, again, someone else's interpretation of this character and like doing his own kind of freedom and liberties with it. But along with that, there came a lot of like pop culture stuff in Japan. So this includes like all of the, like, there's like a pinball machine, like toys. You can see, so you get a lot of, and the way it collects it is you'll get like a couple images of like toys and merchandise, and then you'll get some comics. So it's like a really fluid reading experience because it's some back history of the characters and whatnot, and what was happening and why this happened. Some movie posters and whatnot, and then you get some comics and you get some more ephemera kind of stuff. So it's like it's really a fluid reading experience, and you can see like these are photographed images of the manga, so it's got like that aged look to it. But they went back and then they scanned in the translations, obviously, because you wouldn't be able to read it otherwise unless you read Japanese. And there's even like little notations and stuff about what's happening in these issues and why that is significant and whatnot. So it was Hiro Kawata taking a little snapshot of Batman and deciding what he wanted to take from it and put into his manga. So like the first story has Clayface in it. Because for whatever reason, they also got him some Batman comics, obviously, to read. For whatever reason, he's like, that Clayface character looks awesome. I want to do that one. So it's really just this guy like picking a little bit of the characters here and then kind of making his own stories. It's just a blast to read, and I love this book how it's laid out. Just you only get a lot of the pop culture, coffee table kind of knowledge, but also reading the comics along with it. So it's a lot of fun. But this is Bat manga.
All right. My final book is Planet of the Apes Omnibus from Marvel. So before we get into the inside of the book, it's a very small omni, 11 issues. So I think some of the controversy with the book when it was initially released was the price point, which still doesn't really make any sense. But it's a $100 retail omni and for 11 issues. So don't really know what the justification is there.
And just by comparison, this was 18 issues, very slim omnibus, and it was $60 cover price.
Yeah. So very strange. Hopefully that doesn't carry over with any of the other Apes Omnis. Hopefully there are more Apes Omnis. But the other thing that is strange is changing the title. I don't really understand. So this was based off the original Marvel comics, which were recolorings from the comics that were in the magazines. But it tells the story of the first two films. But at that time, it was Adventures on the Planet of the Apes. And then Omni is Planet of the Apes Adventures. I don't know if that's just for... The only thing I'd come up with is, so if you're doing it alphabetically, all your Planet of the Apes books would be together.
Probably.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's just kind of strange.
But on the cover, they could have kept it the same. I don't know why they didn't need to change that part of it. Just
yeah,
change
they could have just kept
spine title.
The original cover even.
Yeah.
I really wish they would have used the cover from issue 10. But speaking of covers, that was actually something that I was surprised by. I didn't realize. I've read some of these single issues, but not all of them. Starlin did a cover.
Oh.
And I didn't realize it until I flipped that page, and I was like, what? Well, that's awesome.
And this one's by Gil Kane, right?
First one? Yes.
So, and he doesn't do
this one. It's not the first issue, but...
Right, but he doesn't do interiors, right?
No.
So they had different people doing covers.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was a really fun... For something that's just... an adaptation of a movie, usually those aren't that great. And you're summarizing the movie in comic book format. But this was really fun. Like, I had no problem reading through this, and I was excited. I knew the story and how it was going to end and things, but I was excited to get there. Like, I really enjoyed it as a comic book. It's very well written for an adaptation.
I was curious your opinion on this, because Brian's a huge Planet of the Apes fan. I don't know if you said that or not. But, so you having, like, a kind of a deep relationship with these movies, because you love them so much, I was wondering how it played off. Like, did they change anything in the movies? Are they taking liberties, or is it exactly?
It's pretty much exactly as it was, to an extent. So, at least during the first movie adaptation, especially maybe the second one a little bit more too, they didn't see the final film, so they were working from like the script and a couple of like still shots that they got. So there's some things that aren't quite right, like the big reveal scene at the end of the first film.
That's not the same?
It's the same scene, but in the comic book, it's from a different angle, which kind of completely changes, because we've seen that scene so many times in the last 50, 60 years. Seeing it from a different angle is like, oh, well, that's not as dramatic. But they hadn't seen that scene in the movie, otherwise they would have done it the same way.
I want to look at that, but we can wait till it's off air if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Because I don't know if it's a spoiler. It is like one of the big reveals of movies, and I'm sure people have seen it. But
yeah, I mean, from what, 68 or so?
Yeah.
You've been spoiled by now. The Simpsons did it. If The Simpsons did it, then spoiler warning's gone.
I do want to, because I bought all of them on iTunes, so I have access to all these movies. But I've only ever watched the first one, the Tim Burton one. I've only watched the first of all of them, because I watched the first of this one, the only Tim Burton one, and then the first of the new series. So I need to fill in all those gaps. But I think one thing that intrigued me about this was the concept of the Charles Heston. That's his name, right? Of why he isn't in the second movie so much.
Heston not really wanting to do the second or any more Apes movies and having to work with that limitation.
I think I heard too, like he donated his money from that he made. He's only in the first scene or something on the second one, and he didn't even want the money from it. He's like, okay, I'll do it because I care enough about it that I don't want you to be completely left out with my character. But it's also interesting they didn't just recast it. I mean, I know you can't just recast Charles, but like the fact that they did a different character as the protagonist,
and they very easily could have just recast it. And what they did, I mean, they essentially created another version of this character.
Exactly. I mean, that's again from what I've heard and stuff, but that almost makes me, that whole story almost makes me want to watch the second movie even more. So I need to get to it. The interior artwork on here, though, is really like classic Silver Bronze Age ish, and that kind of made me want to buy this omnibus too. Just like
so one of the other interesting things. So in the second film, which you don't seem to see right now. There's underground mutants. The way they're portrayed in the film and the way they're portrayed in the comics is completely different. They look like zombies almost in the comic, with like melting skin and stuff.
How do they look in the movie?
Like more alien-like, very smooth and
interesting.
hairless.
I saw someone share the image that you just showed on Twitter recently, and they're like, "What comic book am I reading?" And people were trying to guess. And then I saw that it was from this, but.
Yeah, but this is, I mean, again, for an adaptation, this might be my favorite adaptation because usually they're, it's like, I've seen the story. I don't need to read it. But this was a lot of fun to read through.
Yeah, movie adaptations I kind of, like licensed comics and adaptation comics are kind of an intriguing thing for me to like read to see what they do with it. And all the stories you hear, like the Star Wars one, they really kept like George Lucas really didn't let them know anything with those comics because he didn't want anything to leak out. Even like the toy companies, I think he was like really private about until like a certain point. So it's interesting when filmmakers too, like, I don't know, as a filmmaker, I think the one person you'd want to know what was going on is the guy doing a comic book, but they're probably like, that's like gonna be thrown away. Like, who cares about that?
Yeah, anyway? Especially during this time.
Yeah.
Like, wasn't, because I mean, again, these all came in the magazine initially. They weren't colored. This was after they were colored and put into a comic book format.
Did Marvel publish the magazine?
Yes.
So they did publish the magazine when it was in black and white, and that ran like longer than this, right? They're like last like 30 issues or something.
I believe so. I don't know a whole lot about the magazine, but I think so. I think it was quite a bit longer
because they did the Savage Sword of Conan magazine omnibuses too. They pumped all those out, so I wonder if they'll do the magazine, and if they do, are they going to? That's the thing that boggles my mind about how thin this is. Like, if they're going to do those, are they going to just do the black and white versions of it in the omnibus where all the issues are together, or are they going to put the colored versions in that one? Because if they do that, then what's the point of this thing?
Yeah, and I mean, they could have put there's no extras in this at all,
which is another crazy thing. They could have pad this thing out a little bit.
You could have fleshed it out more just by putting extra crap in it. But and this is the one extra. It's the other Omni.
They could have even like put the movie script in there or something stupid like
really
just
anything.
Words on a page. I don't know.
There's so many different things I could have done just to put more page count in there.
Yeah,
to make it the price point just is insane. But I bought it because I'm a big Planet of the Apes fan, and I hope that they sell enough to keep doing more Planet of the Apes Omnis.
I kind of hope they do too, especially because there's so many Planet of the Apes comics, history of it that they could pump out. But I'm also kind of afraid the backlash and the controversy over this one and the price point. I'm hoping that didn't hurt the sales so much that they're like, oh, nobody's going to buy this.
Yeah, and if the issue was the cost of restoring the pages, which is something that I have heard, that shouldn't be an issue with a lot of the other things that are collecting. I'm assuming the license works the same way as other license, so all the Boom Studios stuff, and they can reprint. And if that's the case, then those are more modern books that won't need as much work put into them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I'm flexible with restoration costs. Like, that's like Marvel Masterworks, classic Marvel stuff. Like, all that, I understand restoration costs more, so I'm not expecting it to be $60 like Howard the Duck, but $75 maybe, $80. Like, I think they priced themselves out to where it's only going to be diehard Apes fans that buy it, instead of people that are going to like, oh, I like Marvel omnibuses, I'm going to give this a shot.
And it was so crazy. Like, even I knew exactly what was in it before it arrived, but when for whatever reason, I was imagining it like the Howard the Duck size. I knew it was going to be smaller, but I was expecting it to be like an inch wide.
Yeah.
So I pull it out of the box and I'm like, whoa, well, I guess it is 11 issues. That makes sense.
Yeah. It's still not the slimmest though. No. Devil Dinosaur by Jack Kirby was only 9 issues, but also it was only $29.99.
All right. Well, those are our books for the month. Go check them out at your local comic store. But you don't have to take our word. I butchered it. You know what to do. Go read them.
Go to your comic shop.